2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Good. All right. Edna, thank you. You just took us live on YouTube. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Health Coverage Insurance and Financial Services Committee Room. This morning, we will start with introductions and then we'll move on to 2 public hearings. And after lunchtime, we will tackle a work session. We'll start with committee introductions this morning, beginning with Representative Quint.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tracy Quint. I represent House District 144.
Representative Quint, you're on mute. Oh, maybe not.
Did you hear me? Yes, no?
Yes, I'm sorry. My computer sound was down. I apologize. All right. My glitch, not yours. So next up, we'll hear from Representative Arford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Representative Poppy Arford, and I serve District 49, the western part of Brunswick.
Thank you. And Representative Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Richard Evans, and I represent District 120, including the towns of Atkinson, Brownville, Dover, Foxcroft, Medford, Milo, Hornerville Township, and Lakeview Plantation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Matheson.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christy Matheson. I represent Kittery District 1. I'm at the State House today, and I think that there was a drop in temperature by about 70 degrees since yesterday. I don't know why.
I believe we call it climate change. Thank you, Ms. Matheson. And Representative Blyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Blyer. I represent District 22, which is Leamington and part of Buxton, Standish, and Limerick. Thank you.
Okay, and next up we'll have Representative Melorano.
Good morning, I'm Gina Melorano. I represent House District 62, which is part of Auburn. Did you catch that?
Yes, we did. Thank you. Your video froze for a second, but your voice was clear. And Representative Morris.
Yes, good morning. I'm State Representative Joshua Morris. I represent House District 75, which is Turner, Leeds, and Livermore.
Thank you. And Senator Brenner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. My name is Stacey Brenner. I represent Senate District 30, which includes all of Gorham, most of Scarborough, and part of Buxton.
And Senator Sanborn.
Thank you, Representative Tepler. I'm Heather Sanborn. I represent Senate District 28, which is half of Portland and half of Westbrook. And I was just going to recommend that we let Representative Quint reintroduce herself because I don't think she got a chance to actually say her name.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that because my sound was down, so I didn't hear any of it. Yes, Representative Quint, would you reintroduce yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Tracy Quint. I represent House District 144, including Amity, Bancroft, and Weston. Thank you. There's other towns too, but I'm just trying to hit some every now and then.
Thank you for that. And my name is Denise Tepler. I represent House District number 54, which is all of the town of Topsom, and serve as House co-chair of the committee. And we are ably assisted today by both our clerk, Edna Caford, and by our incredible analyst, Colleen McCarthy-Reed. Thank you both. We couldn't do it without you. And we'll start with LD 482, an act regarding pet insurance, brought to us by our very own Senator Sanborn. Senator Sanborn, please introduce your bill.
Thank you, Representative Tepler and honorable colleagues on the committee. I am before you today to introduce LD 482, an act regarding pet insurance. As those who frequently watch our Zoom committee meetings know, I have 2 dogs that have been my constant companions through these last couple of difficult years. For me and so many other Mainers, our cats and dogs are not only our pets, but parts of our family. We brave frigid temperatures like the ones this morning to make sure that they get exercise. We count on them to be there for us in times of need. And in return, we take them to the vet at the first signs of illness or for whatever medicine and care they may need. My interest in pet insurance began about 15 years ago when my first dog, a then 8-year-old border collie, suddenly became very gravely ill. I took him to the emergency vet and quickly learned that he had a giant, quick-growing tumor, which could be removed surgically, but would likely grow back within months. I had an infant and very little family income. I agonized over what to do, and I felt even more heartsick because the unaffordable cost of the surgery weighed so heavily as a factor in my consideration of how to proceed. On that day, I swore I would never have a dog as a member of the family again without having pet insurance so that I could afford whatever care my furry family member needed without regard to the cost. And indeed, I have stuck to that pledge, and my 2 dogs today have been covered by pet insurance since the day they each came to live with me. As chair of this committee, I've become a pretty sophisticated insurance consumer. But as I shopped for insurance for my pandemic puppy, Loki, in 2020, I did some research on what consumer protections were in place to regulate those policies. I found that the National Association for Insurance Commissioners was in the process of developing a model act to regulate pet insurance. In the meantime, pet insurance was regulated as property insurance, no different than a policy you might buy to cover your bicycle or a piece of jewelry, even though pet insurance is structured much more like human health insurance than property insurance. It's time to update that regulatory regime to better reflect what pet insurance is and its central importance in protecting a family member. My proposed amendment to this bill incorporates the nearly final NAIC model language. The language has been worked on for years by a group of insurance commissioners and stakeholders. While the Model Act isn't completely finalized, the outstanding issues relate only to limited lines producers and are not related to the core issues in this bill, which critically addresses required disclosures, pre-existing condition provisions, renewal provisions, and limitations on waiting periods. Maine would be the first state to adopt this Model Act and would lead the way in protecting consumers who seek to protect their pets with this type of insurance. As we emerge from 2 years of a pandemic in which our pets have become even more central to our lives, this is the perfect time for our state to take this important step forward. I thank you for your time, and I would welcome any questions that you have.
Thank you, Senator Sanborn. Are there any questions from the committee at this time? Seeing none, I will move to testimony in favor of the bill and we'll call Carrie Lee of Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson Tepler. It took me a moment to get into the panelist mode. And thank you, Chairperson Tepler and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify before you this morning. My name is Carrie Lee, and I am the Director of Government Affairs for Steptoe & Johnson, and I represent the North American Pet Health Insurance Association. We are also known as NAFIA. NAFIA represents more than 25 insurers who write about 99% of the pet insurance market in the state of Maine. For background, of the 73 million cats and 75 million dogs in the US today, only 3% of them are covered by pet insurance as of right now. But that is changing. And as Senator Sanborn said, more and more people are purchasing pets and the price of veterinary care is increasing. For example, the average cost of stomach surgery to remove a sock is $7,000. The average monthly premium for an accident and illness pet insurance policy today for dogs is $49, and for cats is $29. These policies cover things like allergies, diabetes, cancer, and yes, the removal of SOC. And NAFIA largely supports the bill that is before you today. In fact, as Senator Sanborn mentioned, we have been working on the bill with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners for more than 2.5 years. And we hope that there's going to be final adoption at the NAIC national meeting in April. And although we reached many compromises, we have consistently expressed concerns with 2 provisions, which we are asking this committee to consider modifying. First, we are asking the committee to consider the removal of the waiting period restrictions, and at the very least, have a discussion with us about how to improve this language. The industry has used these waiting periods for over 40 years to keep the policies affordable, available, and limit adverse selection. The model before you today is a good model because it requires clear and conspicuous disclosure of waiting periods prior to the purchase of the policy. And it also requires a mechanism for a consumer to waive the waiting period through a veterinary exam. Furthermore, California, the only state in the nation that has pet insurance legislation on the books until Maine passes yours, they have no restriction on the use of waiting periods. Second, we are asking for a clarification in the marketing of the wellness products sold alongside pet insurance. We believe the bill lacks clarity if an insurer can offer a third-party wellness product at the same time they offer an insurance policy. We know that many of our customers want to purchase both and they want to do it at the same time. And the bill before you today requires insurers to clearly disclose wellness products are not insurance. It also prohibits insurance from requiring a wellness product in order to purchase pet insurance. And most importantly, for me as a former regulator, the bill requires the wellness products cannot duplicate coverage in the insurance policy. So we believe these modifications could significantly improve the bill and ensure consumers have access to affordable and available pet insurance, including the wellness products that complement pet policies. In the interest of time, I will conclude my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or at the work session.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Are there any questions from the committee regarding Ms. Lee's testimony? Yes, I see 2 hands up. Representative Evans, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms. Lee. Just clarify for me again about the wellness products. The last time I had a pet, I was a kid and he didn't like me very much. So I'm out of the loop.
Understood. So wellness products are products like that would cover shots and nail trims or any maintenance that the pet would need, and are oftentimes a way to reduce your costs. You purchase the plan through sometimes through a veterinarian, sometimes you purchase it through a third party. And it gives you an opportunity to, control your costs for all those, regular type visits that you take your dog to the vet for. So, I mean, they really do complement an insurance policy, which is covering, the items that are much more severe in nature. And, it's not routine pet care. And that's, we think wellness products are great, and some insurers offer a wellness product at the time of sale as a separate policy through a third-party provider. Or sometimes there are some policies out there today that will include some of these maintenance type services in their insurance product. And in that case, they are insurance. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. And now I'll turn to Representative Morris, who has a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple. Following up on Representative Evans, because that was my question on the wellness products, but just to dive a little deeper into it. So a wellness product So as I understand it, the insurance covers like if the dog gets cancer or something like that, but it doesn't cover the regular yearly checkup wellness visit in the wellness product. Would that cover that, or is that how that would work?
Representative Morris, that's correct. So the wellness product would cover, well, it's a product, so it's not insurance in this
Right.
instance that we're talking about. So yes, it would cover, you'll pay a fee and you can take your dog to the vet 3 times for the year. It includes so many nail trims. Each of them are different. There's a lot of variation out there, but yes, it would cover.
And what's
those
the
types of
average cost of a wellness product?
They vary, but there's. I'm not sure I actually know the average cost of the wellness product because it's not something the insurers are always selling.
Okay.
So I would have to get back to you on that average cost.
And so I guess what sorry to
Yeah, no,
what
that's
I'm
fine.
asking more along the lines of it. What I'm also I guess more clarity on it would be, so what you're seeking with this legislation is it's not clear whether the insurer can sell the wellness product at the same time that they sell the insurance, and you're seeking, obviously, I would assume, to be able to sell them both as long as it's disclosed what you're selling.
Absolutely. We actually worked really closely with the regulators to ensure that the language in this bill really does go beyond, goes above and beyond protecting consumers, because we had heard that in some instances, consumers did not know that the wellness product wasn't insurance. And so we added language to this bill along with the regulators, and it's good language that requires the disclosure that it's not pet insurance. And it also requires other protections, which I think are really fantastic and consumer friendly.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tepler, I did have a couple other on something else, but I see Representative Matheson has her hand up, and it may be along these same lines, so I'll defer to her.
Thank you, Representative Morris. Appreciate your deferral, and call on Representative Matheson.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to figure out the differentiation and the determination of this wellness at being in preventative health care. Myself, it seems that those preventative appointments are definitely covered by insurance and prevent further problems. So I guess that carve out is just, maybe this is for the work session. If I could get clarification on why that is a carve out and what definitively is covered by insurance for preventative care versus this wellness product. That would be helpful for me. I apologize, I don't have as much information on this type of insurance as I do typical healthcare insurance.
So Representative Matheson, that's a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up. So the accident and illness policies that are out in the market today, there is a ton of variation and there are multitude of choices. It's a very competitive market, which is a good thing. I think that's a very good thing for consumers. And right now, the accident and illness products are not meant to cover what I would call like the ACA type benefits. Like when you go in, your physical is covered and vaccines and all of those things are covered. And these policies are meant to cover, as I said, like the allergies, diabetes, cancer, more serious type ailments. And that's why their prices reflect that. If you're only paying $50 a month for your policy, then there has to be some limitations on what it's going to cover. That's why the wellness products make a nice wraparound to this product, but they are not whole comprehensive coverage. That being said, there are some insurers in some of these products that do offer you know, you can purchase a policy if you want it. You're going to pay probably more for it, but you can purchase a policy that includes the nail trims, or that might include the yearly visit or 2 yearly visits, that preventative care. There are companies that do that, but there's a variation in the market, and that way the consumer can say, you know, what can they afford? You're going to pay more if that's what you want. Does that sort of help answer the question? And if we get to work session, we can go into this in much more detail.
Sure, I understand. I think that having a carve out there could be confusing to the consumer, but I understand. Thank you for the answer.
Are you all set, Ms. Matheson? Rep Matheson, thank you. And Ms. Lee, I'm going to take chair's privilege and ask you a quick question before I turn to the other two people who have their hands up. Who regulates wellness products? When it comes to something that's labeled insurance, I know that we, the states and our Bureau of Insurance, regulate those, but who regulates the wellness products?
That's an excellent question, Representative Tepler. And if the wellness benefits are included in the insurance policy, that is regulated by your state insurance department. And they have full say over that. The wellness products that are sold outside of an insurance policy are not regulated by the state insurance department. And as far as I know, they do not have a regulatory body that would oversee that over those types of products.
Okay, so they're unregulated products.
That is my understanding.
Thank you.
The ones that are sold outside of an insurance policy yes.
I understand if it's within your insurance policy, it's insurance.
Yep.
It's the standalone wellness policies I'm referring to.
Yes.
Yes. And now I'll turn to back to Representative Morris, who had, I think, a question more or two, and then to Representative Melarano. Go ahead, Representative Morris.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I actually just wanted to touch on, you talked about the waiting periods issue. So I guess, you know, what do you guys generally do in a contract if this, you know, you wanted it waived or amended? How do waiting periods generally work? And just kind of also along the lines of what the sponsor indicated in her testimony, as she said, many people do view their pets, or I mean, I know I do, as members of the family. And so it's obviously a situation where, you know, there's concern about making sure that when they buy this insurance, they're going to be covered. So I guess just sort of how do the waiting periods generally work? And how would you fix the language for this as it relates to this model bill?
I was waiting for that question, Representative Morris, and thank you for asking it. So the waiting periods in the model that is before you today has a 30-day limitation on waiting periods for illnesses and orthopedic conditions, but it prohibits any waiting period for accidents. And the reason that the industry uses waiting periods is because of how pet insurance is purchased. It is purchased online, and mainly 99% of the time it's purchased online. You go out and you purchase your policy. And when you do that, there is not a lot of underwriting that happens on your pet. And so the industry has a lot of variation. There is no set standard today. And I believe that's one of the reasons why you're seeing this language in the bill of, you know, what the waiting periods are in each policy. Some companies offer, you know, no waiting periods. Some may offer, you know, 48-hour waiting period, but many of them do use the waiting period, and they do it because they are trying to prevent what I would call just-in-time insurance. And let me give you an example of what that is. So if I have a dog who ate a sock, or I think ate a sock. You never know, right? But and the dog's looking unwell, and I don't have insurance. I may then say, well, you know what? Gilbert's not looking well. I think I'm going to go I think I'm going to go look to see if I should buy pet insurance. Maybe I should get some coverage. And then I'm going to take if he gets worse, I'm going to take him into the vet. And what the industry is trying to prevent is this just-in-time insurance, because with insurance, the whole concept and the whole purpose, and this is really important when you think about insurance, is to purchase this for an unforeseen event, not one that you know is going to happen or is likely to happen. You're buying it, it's a just in case type, I'm buying it because I, want to be super prepared and protect my family member, because I feel the same way about my pet. And that's how it's supposed to work. But, the thing you have to think about, and it's kind of counterintuitive, is the policyholders that have purchased the policy when their pet was healthy. Those folks need to be protected also from the consumer who goes, well, maybe I'll just buy it now because, Gilbert seems sick. And, maybe I'll just get it now. And you're not doing that nefariously. But when I come into the pool with my sick pet, what do we do to all of you that bought it when you had a healthy pet? I'm going to raise the premiums for all of you. And if a lot of people do that, it's going to make the policies more expensive. And then you may say, you know what, I can't afford this policy anymore.
Right.
And so that's really the crux of it. We've suggested some language, but we certainly would love to work with the committee to make this language a little better than what is currently in the bill. And we could get into all those details at the work session with you, but we would just like that opportunity. Maybe we'll reach an agreement, maybe we won't, but we certainly would like to have a conversation on it.
Ms. Lee, I'd like to just clarify one point on Representative Morris's line of questioning before we move on. Are pre-existing conditions excluded in this bill?
Yes. So if your pet has a pre-existing condition that is verifiable, they are most time not, and this is the majority of policies are going to have pre-existing condition exclusions. However, we're starting to see policies that only have a 1-year moratorium on pre-existing conditions. It's as I said, it's a competitive market, and people want, insurers want your business.
I guess I'm confused about the sock situation. If your pet has swallowed a sock before you have the insurance, that's a pre-existing condition.
You know what? That is exactly correct. It would be a pre-existing condition, but under the language in the bill, it's up to the insurer to prove that it was a pre-existing condition. And so now it gets into back and forth between myself and the insurer. Well, what time did this happen? Did the pet swallow the sock at 5 o'clock and I purchased the insurance the next morning? And that's really almost impossible for the insurer to prove. And, honestly, the amount of time and money that it would take the insurer to, go back and forth to prove that, I may be misrepresenting what time it occurred that my dog swallowed the sock is just not worth it. So I'm likely just to pay the claim.
Okay, thank you. Representative Morris, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Matt. Yeah, no, you're fine. I appreciate that question follow-up, because I also, because the way this language is written, it says 30 days. And so in the sock situation, obviously a dog is not, you need that, they need to get there immediately. So even if you were the 30 days in the sock situation, the way the bill is written, I assume there's enough protection there for those other consumers that, as you said, bought the insurance for those purposes. So even if somebody were to buy when their dog eats the sock and needs to have it removed, the language of this bill would seem to suggest that wouldn't be covered right now. You wouldn't have to cover that right now anyway.
Well, and that depends. And that's where we get back to Representative Tepler's question, sort of. So in the SOX situation, and that would be, that's potentially an act defined as an accident, right? There is a prohibition in this bill on any waiting period for accidents. So if you purchased a policy and right after you think, the next morning, you think your dog swallowed the sock and, they look unwell. So you purchase a policy in the morning, and you bring your dog in and then you get the sock removed and you submit your vet bill to the insurer. That's how that works. The insurer is going to have a really hard time proving what time did your pet swallow this sock. And so the prohibition on accidents is actually one of the provisions that is more concerning to us. The 30 days for illnesses and orthopedic is also concerning in the fact that it puts this arbitrary number on it. And as I said, the industry is competitive and there's a lot of different variations in the market today. And, if we talk about like orthopedic conditions, they're really expensive to cover, like a hip dysplasia in a lab. And sometimes those types of conditions, they take a long time to manifest. And so the insurers have put in this waiting period, which basically says, hey, we know this is really expensive. We like to have a waiting period of 60 days before we're going to cover hip dysplasia, because if we don't do that, we're going to have to raise your premium a lot. And we don't think you're going to buy the policy then. And so there's a lot of different mechanisms that are happening in the market today. And so we have concerns that the current language is restrictive and might actually go the opposite way for the consumer.
Okay. Thank you.
All set, Representative Morris?
I am.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your patience, Representative Malorano. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay, may I ask? Great. So my question was about the waiting period issue as well. And thank you, by the way, for being here, Ms. Lee. I do appreciate it. I don't know if this is a question for you or perhaps even you said California has a pet insurance statute on the books already without the waiting period provision. And my question would be, how long typically or on average is the waiting period? And, I don't know if this might be a question for the California Bureau of Insurance, or if that data is available, or maybe Ms. McCarthy-Reed could get it for us for the work session. But I would be interested in how long these waiting periods are typically. Thanks.
Yes, and that is an excellent question as well. So the waiting periods right now vary a lot in the market. There's a lot of variation, but typically you're going to see for accidents about 72 hours is the average for accidents. For illnesses I'll take them each separately. For illnesses, you're typically going to see a waiting period anywhere from 2 weeks to 60 days. For orthopedic conditions, you're going to see a longer waiting period. If the policy covers orthopedic conditions, you're going to see waiting periods 30 days up to 6 months. And that is, really then going to bring your policy premium down. If you have a new puppy, is probably something you might be okay with. So they do vary. And the thing I would really like to stress to the committee is there is so many different options for consumers right now. And this bill's really good because it really does bring in a couple things that we're missing. And it's the very, very clear disclosure requirement before somebody purchases the policy. And really the other thing that to me is very great, very good language is the mechanism for the consumer to choose to say, hey, I want that policy, but I don't want to be subject to that waiting period. And so if that's the case, the insurer says, okay, this is what you can do. You can take your dog in for a veterinary exam and we'll waive that waiting period. And that's what we think this is good. We think this is good language and we're happy to see it. And we're happy to reach agreement with all the regulators on this. This is good.
Thank you.
All set, Representative Melorano? Thank you. And thank you for helping us understand your point of view, Ms. Lee. We appreciate your time. And with that, we will turn to the one other person I have signed up to give testimony, Mr. Yardley of the Bureau of Insurance, in support of the bill. While Mr. Yardley gets on, I want to acknowledge that I see Mr. Garrity's hand up, but we'll take him after Mr. Yardley as those who are in at least neither for nor against or in opposition to certain parts of the bill. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Representative Tepler, Senator Sanborn, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Ben Yardley. I'm senior attorney at the Bureau of Insurance, and like some of you, we have pets. 3 of them are at our house today, and I hope they don't interrupt me, but if they do, I apologize in advance. I'm here to testify in support of LD 482. As you've heard, this bill adopts language from an NAIC model that has been carefully and extensively discussed over the last 2 or 2.5 years, involving a working group that heard from consumers, insurers, veterinarians, and regulators. The Senator Sanborn mentioned that the draft is not yet fully complete. The issue relates to licensing of limited lines licensing of pet producers, which was raised by one state at a meeting of the NAIC in the late fall. We think that the bill offers important protections for consumers. It mandates that consumer disclosures explain important terms and conditions, give policyholders the right to return a policy within 15 days, provided that no claim has been made, and requires benefit schedules to be transparent. You've heard a lot about 2 important points that the bill covers. These were issues that were thoroughly discussed in the national conversation. The bill defines pre-existing conditions as conditions that manifest themselves before the date of coverage. The bill would allow pre-existing conditions to be pre-existing conditions, but they'd have to be disclosed. And insurers may also, they don't have to, this is permissive. Insurers may impose waiting periods for illnesses or orthopedic conditions, but not for accidents. And the waiting period cannot exceed 30 days. As Ms. Lee said, the insurer would have to waive a waiting period if the covered pet underwent a medical exam. The bill also prohibits insurers and producers from marketing wellness programs as insurance and marketing wellness programs while selling, soliciting, or negotiating pet insurance. This is important because, as the conversation between Ms. Lee and Representative Tepler illuminated, wellness programs are not insurance, and they are not intended to cover the cost of fortuitous events. Wellness is like maintenance. I'm reluctant to compare pets to dogs, but I mean to vehicles, but maintenance is going in and getting the dog's toenails clipped, just as it is going in and having the oil in your engine changed. This stuff by itself is not insurance, and the bill, I think, correctly says that if you're going to sell pet insurance and wellness plan as two separate products, let's not talk about them during the sale of let's not conflate the two during the sale of the insurance policy. The bill, I think, in conclusion, I would just say that it offers important protections in a rapidly growing area of insurance that's increasingly important to many, many people. So with that, I'd be happy to try to answer questions here and be happy to bring information to the work session.
Apologies, my telephone is ringing, but I will turn to Representative Morris, who has a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Yardley. I wanted to kind of ask a question along the lines of the wellness products and so forth. As I understand it, I could go online and Google pet insurance and buy everything online is one way. Is there a way to also buy it through, say, talking to a person through either over the phone? I don't know if there's any brokers set up to come and talk to you at your home yet, but Senator Sanborn's nodding her head, so I would suppose that might be the case. And I guess my question is, obviously online there should be a prohibition to not conflate the two when I'm online shopping for it. But if I am if I'm talking to someone over the phone trying to purchase this product and I ask those questions, I guess and they also sell it, is there a way to sort of, thread that needle with language? Because as long as they're not conflating the two, which I think is what you're after, and I think we all can agree is a good prohibition, but is there a way to kind of thread that needle?
Thank you, Representative Morris. So I think the devil's in the details. It depends what happens in the conversation.
Right. Let me just say, I'll give you an example. So say I'm buying pet insurance, and I have questions about it, and I say to them, can I also get my vet visits covered? And obviously, if they're the insurance person and they sell that product, how can they answer that question in that moment without, because obviously if they sell the product, they want to be able to offer it too. But I understand what you're saying. You don't want them thinking that it's the same product.
Exactly. And I think that because it's was observed, this has a lot of similarity to health insurance for people, and it has some of the same language that we see in other provisions of our law. You don't want to have confusion about what the customer is getting, and the information that I've seen is that wellness programs, so for a puppy, I've seen that wellness program would cover spaying or neutering, which could be a valuable incentive. I do believe that wellness programs come with caps, and so I don't know it would probably be helpful for the committee to see some examples of coverage, what a wellness program does. A wellness program might be what Senator Sanborn would want for her puppy, But if we go out and adopt a 10-year-old dog, that whatever the wellness program offers might not be relevant. And so you wouldn't want the consumer being, I don't want to say misled, but being confused into making a decision that might not be in the consumer's financial interest. And so we think that it's important to keep both of those provisions in the wellness marketing and the point of sale transaction. Keep that stuff separate. I would strongly suggest that that's an important protection.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I've answered your question.
Can I
I
follow up just a little,
Yes.
Mr. Yardley?
Yeah.
Please,
Yeah.
thank
So
you.
are there any protections in pet insurance regarding essentially a medical loss ratio sort of approach? Do insurers have to provide X amount of value for what is paid out?
There are no loss ratios that I'm aware of.
Okay. Are there any regulations on what percentage of a wellness product has to be spent on consumers?
So I think the answer to that would be no, because wellness programs are not the standalone, it's not insurance. I suppose if somebody thought they had been misled, they could take a complaint about a wellness program to the Attorney General.
Thank you. Do we have any sense, or maybe Colleen McCarthy-Reed can help us with this. Do we have any sense of what percentage of what's taken in by companies that sell wellness products is profit?
Not that I know of. We could, I can see that I'm getting some typing going on in a chat I have. If we, there might be an answer in a moment, but I don't have one just now.
Right. That would be fine for the work session, Mr. Yardley. Thank you. And did anyone else in the committee? I think Representative Matheson had her hand up at one point. Nope, she's good. Okay.
And could I just address one issue about the waiting period?
Sure, please, Mr. Yardley.
Thanks. So I think that the danger is to conflate fraud, if you will, with somebody who has an accident. And there are opportunities for the insurer to suss out whether a claim, and this happens in automobile insurance, which is also purchased online with minimal underwriting at the time of the transaction. An insurer can investigate whether the circumstances of the SOC, but the consumer who goes out and buys a policy legitimately and has an accident, or the dog has an accident and suffers an injury, you would expect there to be coverage for that right from the get-go. And we haven't seen yet any information about how coverage from moment one would affect premium. This is information that I mean, this has been discussed as a concern, but we haven't seen it quantified.
Thank you, Mr. Yardley. We appreciate your sharing all this information with us. And I understand I owe an apology to Mr. Gertie, who apparently is signed up to testify in favor of the bill, although that's not visible on my my testimony list. So let's bring in Mr. Garrity to testify in favor of the bill.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Garrity. Thank you.
I suspect it might not have been prominently displayed, Representative, that I was speaking in favor because quite often my clients seem to have problems with legislation, and I maybe don't find myself on the positive side as often as I might. Senator Sanborn, Representative Tepler, and members of the committee, my name is Bruce Garrity. I'm here on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, whose members write the significant majority of insurance in the state of Maine and around the country. And we are speaking in support of LD 482, and with the same two caveats as you heard from Ms. Lee. And rather than go through what I had written out as my testimony, so many points have been covered. I think that making some specific comments might be more helpful to the committee at this point. First, pet insurance is widely offered. There are at least 25 companies we know of that offer it in Maine, and they have a variety of coverages. I think the committee should consider whether it wants to have a statute that will stifle some of that competition. For example, you have heard that in some instances, orthopedic problems may have as much as a 6-month waiting period or a longer waiting period than some others, but the premium goes down. If that's what a person would like to purchase, what's the public policy in support of saying, we won't allow that? We're going to limit you to 30 days, which means the company is going to say, okay, we won't offer that product in Maine, but if you go down to Massachusetts, you can have the choice of that product. I submit that one of the things the committee ought to consider when it comes to waiting period is, how are you depriving the consumer of choice in a very active marketplace? People can shop. It's easy to shop online. They can get what they want. I think the second point in response to some of the questions relates to the wellness questions that have been asked. If you look at the proposed legislation under section 3157, it specifically identifies wellness practices for the sales practices for wellness programs. It doesn't stop the sale of wellness programs. It says you have to distinguish between wellness and insurance. But what it does say, and it's the one line we have a concern with, and that's subsection 1B. The language is, market a wellness program during the sale, solicitation, or negotiation of pet insurance is something you cannot do. What do you do when someone calls, as Representative Morris mentioned, and says, well, what about a wellness program? Well, the person answering the question will automatically be marketing the program if they even say, yeah, you can get a wellness program, and it will either affect the cost of your insurance or it won't, but it'll provide other options for you. It does, as I said, it doesn't say you can't sell it. And there are disclosures. For example, in subsection 3 of section 3157, it says that an insurance or producer shall clearly disclose the following in 12-point boldface type: that wellness programs are not insurance, the Bureau's mailing address and toll-free number, and the address and customer service number of the insurer or the producer of record. So one of the things you're putting in is very clear disclosures that will protect the consumer and advise the consumer who the regulator is, who they can go to if they have any questions, because you're getting the information required to be sent right to the Bureau of Insurance. And given that the goal is not to preclude the sale of wellness programs, because subsection 2 talks about all the disclosures that are required in order to be able to do it, that one sentence that says you can't market it at a minimum creates confusion. That's what you're trying to avoid in this legislation. So we would respectfully suggest that that one subsection be stricken. With respect to the issue of waiting periods, I already mentioned the point about limiting the options that people have online if you have no waiting period for accidents or a 30-day waiting period for illnesses. There is a provision that says if the person wants to not have a waiting period at all, they can go to their vet and have an appointment, submit that information to the insurer, and there won't be a waiting period. That's an option. And it is an option that's laid out in the statute. But there are times when everyone acting in good faith might not know that there's been an accident that's pre-existing. And I'll give you an example. Many of you know my colleague, Diane Johansson. She has a dog. That dog went out on a 3.5-4 mile walk with her. It was a bit of an older dog, and comes back and she noticed it was a little bit lame. She attributed it to the dog not having had that much exercise. A few weeks later, she discovered that in fact the dog had torn a tendon, and she had some very expensive surgery that had to be done. And it turns out it would have been a pre-existing condition. No one knew about it. But even if you'd had a short waiting period in relation to an accident, that helps clarify if the insurer is something pre-existing or is it not. You've heard that the testimony was the standard in the industry seems to be 72 hours. If in fact clarification can be made within that period of time, and again, I'm not talking about fraud. Fraud happens everywhere. It happens by insurers, it happens by consumers, and that's not what I'm trying to address. But having something like a short waiting period helps clarify things. That helps keep costs down. And that is, in a market where costs are already low, we submit a good idea, and only allows clarification, doesn't really hurt the fair submission of insurance. Those were the 2 points, Representative Tepler, that I wanted to add, other than that no one in the country has this kind of limits except this proposed legislation. Not California, not any other state. And in an instance like this, perhaps it's better to take a stance that promotes competition and keeps the market stable rather than move this additional distance. And the last point I would make, we don't know, at least Mr. Yardley and I spoke this morning, and I said, how many complaints has the superintendent had regarding pet insurance? And we don't have that information right now. I would think that's something the committee might really want to know by the time of the work session. Are there problems to be addressed in terms of complaints? And with that, Representative, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. I guess I would question whether or not pet owners know that our State Bureau of Insurance regulates pet insurance and whether they would make that phone call. So that would be a question I would have. But does anyone else on the committee have a question for Mr. Garrity? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. And I just want to apologize to everyone in the meeting because I was using the online list for testimony. I now have a more updated list from our clerk, and I realized that those are the 3 people that I had signed up to speak in favor of the bill: Ms. Lee, Mr. Yardley, and Mr. Garrity. And now I'll turn to our attendee list to see if there's anyone else there who would like to speak in favor of the bill. And seeing no little hands go up, I will turn to those who wish to testify neither for nor against, and we'll call Mr. Bernier into the meeting to present his testimony. Welcome, Mr. Bernier. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Dan Bernier. I represent the Maine Insurance Agents Association. I also have 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a gecko. And a few years ago, when my kids were younger, I probably could have registered my house as a zoo for the number of species and animals we had. But as the kids have gotten older, we've meant, the number's gone down a little bit. This is a relatively new product, at least to the general lines agents. I noticed there were a number of comments about limited lines agents, which generally aren't my members. That's somebody who has a license to sell one specific product. I'd say for most of the general lines agents, they have this product in their portfolio, but it's interesting, as I talk to them where it's a new product, they're probably being a little bit cautious with it. With new products, you can run into hiccups basically with older things like homeowners insurance, auto, life insurance. Companies have been doing it a long time. They have large volumes of data. Agents also have a lot of experience with which products make you happy and which don't. With a newer product like this, there can be hiccups. And I think a lot of agents are cautious because if there's a lot of different policies out there, there is less experience with which policies are going to make you happy and which are not. And to that one thing, what was a little hard on this, and why I'm probably testifying, neither fools, I really didn't have an agent who could walk me through these, what the pros and cons are, because they are relatively new to our membership. We generally do support passing NAIC models. In fact, generally, if you're going to pass legislation on something, we encourage the committee to look for the NAIC model first as your guidance. I'm a little cautious about passing an NAIC model before the NAIC has actually adopted it. I don't know that Maine has ever done that. I'm not saying we're against it here. I think in the future, we may want to wait for the NAIC to actually adopt the model before we adopt it. And with any new policy, there's kind of a balancing act between monitoring it and monitoring the new policy and not stifling innovation. I'm not taking a position on either one. The good news is I get to throw out a thought like that, and you're the committee that has to decide, are we monitoring versus stifling innovation? And I would just do that with any new product. There's a cautiousness that should be there, but we also want to allow people to innovate. The last thing that I was triggered, when we talk about pre-existing conditions, I do see them as being complicated on these. Our dogs come from Labs for Rescue, from a rescue league. Often we will find out, months after we have the dog from our vet, it had a pre-existing condition because we didn't have much of any information when you get a rescue league dog. And so I do see them as being complicated on these. I mean, I wouldn't want an insurer accusing me of fraud because I had a rescue league dog and I had no idea it had that condition, but my vet tells us we do have the condition. So I would also just throw that out as a comment. And I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Bernier. Are there any questions from the committee? I see Representative Morris has a question for you, Mr. Bernier. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So you answered one of my questions from earlier about the sale of these products in person and so forth. Sounds like you may not have the information today, but if you could find out from your members for our work session on how the provisions around the selling of wellness products and all that, because as I said, it's that question from the consumer that asks about something that's not covered by the insurance policy, but that they may also offer in sort of, obviously our goal is to protect the consumer and not have them thinking they're getting something that they're not, that they're getting something in the insurance policy that isn't there, but if the company sells the wellness product. So just kind of how that language works with them, if they've ever run into that with this type of product or how they envision it working. If you could kind of get some information for us on that piece.
I'll be happy to put it out and try. As I kind of said, that one of the issues I've had is I don't think they haven't been really actively selling a lot of these products. So there's a lot of products you can ask me and I can sit down with some agents and get a ton of information on the sales of these. But I will ask about the wellness because, to be honest, in the draft of the bill itself is the first I had heard of those. So I can see what information I can get.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Representative Morris and Mr. Bernier. Mr. Bernier, I just want to briefly comment as to why we may be considering adopting a policy before NAIC finishes adopting it. This bill was put in the last session and put on hold in the assumption that NAIC would, within almost a year, be able to pull it together and get the policy ready to pass, but they did not, and the sponsor is in fact termed out. So I think that's probably why we are moving forward with considering adoption of the policy before the NAIC finishes their work, which seems to be bogged down in some kind of internecine disagreement as to why this is on the table before NAIC goes forward. So that is, I think, one of the answers to your concern about that. And are there any other questions from the committee for Mr. Bernier? Seeing none, I had one other person on my list, but Rory Whelan does not appear to be in the attendee list. Do we see him there, anyone?
No, I don't see him, Representative Tepler.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy-Reed. Is there anyone else in the meeting who wishes to testify neither for nor against or in opposition or in favor of this bill? Okay, seeing none, I will bring the public hearing on LD 482 to a close. And Ms. McCarthy-Reed, do we have a date yet for a work session on this?
Yes, the work session will be Wednesday, March 2nd at 11 a.m.
Okay.
Following our budget hearings. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So Wednesday, March 2nd for interested parties will be the work session. All right, next we'll be moving to a public hearing on LD 1973 brought to us by President Troy Jackson. President Jackson, please join the committee and present your bill. And while President Jackson is coming in, I'm also going to turn to Senator Stewart and Representative Connor to introduce themselves. Actually, Representative Connor, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just deferring to the good senator, but my name is John Connor. I represent part of Lewiston. Thank you.
And Senator Stewart.
Morning, folks. I'm Trey Stewart, State Senator in District 2, which includes 51 communities in Aroostook and Penobscot counties, and I reside in Prescott.
Thank you, Senator Stewart, and welcome, President Jackson. You came quick through the wormhole.
Thank you, Senator Sanborn, Representative Templer, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Health Coverage Insurance Financial Services. Off the record or in the side, I've listened to the entire testimony on the previous bill, and as Senator Stewart knows, I travel to Aroostook County with 2 cats. I don't know if that makes them high risk or what. Certainly some people probably would say with my driving ability, they are high risk cats, but I actually watched that with great interest. So anyways, I am here today to present LD 1973. As I've said, I'm Troy Jackson, a great honor serving Northern Aroostook County and serving as President of the Senate. LD 1973, an act to support frontline healthcare workers by waiving professional license fees. It's no secret that Maine's frontline healthcare workers have faced enormous challenges over the past few years, confronting a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic on top of long-standing workforce shortages hasn't been easy, and we certainly can debate all the reasons why it has been hard on them, but it certainly has been hard on them. And I don't need to tell any of you this. Many of you have heard it from frontline healthcare workers firsthand or experienced it yourself in your work outside the Maine legislature. This bill was to try and come up with a modest attempt to recognize the challenges that healthcare workers have had throughout this by temporarily waiving some of their license fees. You know, we've done it for some other small businesses, and I thought that it might be a fair way to help extend this courtesy to healthcare professionals serving our communities during this tumultuous times. LD 1973 would have waived the licensing fees between March 1, 2020 and December 31, 2022 for emergency medical services workers, registered nurses, practical nurses, respiratory care practitioners, and midwives. And I had also proposed an amendment to add physician assistants to this group. Up until now, Maine and many other states have eased the licensing requirements for those wishing to enter or re-enter the medical field to help in the fight against COVID-19. And this was essential to encourage more people to step forward and lead us out of this period of crisis. But we must now look forward and ensure that these vital frontline workers are supported as we move into the future. I know that supporting our frontline worker community will require many different approaches to ensure that everyone has the resources that they need to move on from the trauma of the past few years. But my hope was that waiving license fees would be one small step to showing that, you know, we very much appreciate the work and that they are definitely understand that they're seen and valued. In developing this legislation, I've heard concerns about how the boards that provide fundamental support to these professions, are concerned. Let me be clear, the funding of LD 1973 was never intended to put the existence of these licensing boards in jeopardy. The work that these boards take on to ensure that Maine people can expect a high standard of care when they go to the hospital is vital to the health and well-being of the state. I also heard concerns related to the broad language of Section 7 of the amended bill. My intent with this language was to be more inclusive of healthcare workers serving in roles comparable to those listed in the bill, who may not carry the same exact titles as those included. However, I was definitely open to amending the bill further to make that language more precise or to get rid of it if the committee thought it was necessary. Like I said, it was something, you know, I have definitely talked about, the great work that healthcare professionals have done through this time and the real challenges that, you know, they were under. This was trying to come up with some small way to give back. And I have understood now after having conversations that, the boards, like I said, it was never intended to take it from the licensing fees. There's an awful lot of licenses out there now that I understand, and I guess it would be extremely hard to track. So I'm not 100% certain that while the intent in my heart was, good and wanted to be, somewhat helpful to the profession, I'm not sure if we can actually do it, but I brought forward the bill. Obviously at that point, there was no chance of pulling it back. And I'm still here, if anything else, to make sure that anyone that does know, I and the legislature obviously feel very strongly about the work that healthcare professionals do. And this is one more way to make sure that, I make that very clear. So with that, I'll take any questions and certainly look forward to whatever the committee chooses to do.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we certainly appreciate the hard work that healthcare workers have done in keeping as many Mainers alive as possible through this pandemic, and between vaccinating them and protecting them in the hospitals. Is there anyone on the committee who has a question for President Jackson? Yes, Representative Evans, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, President Jackson, for being here. And as a co-sponsor on this bill, I think Senator Jackson explained what the intent of the bill is. The drawback that we're seeing at this point is primarily a particular challenge for our boards, the Board of Medicine, and also probably for the Board of Nursing. That was never the intent. So even though the intent was pure in purpose, it's probably going to be difficult unless there is a separate source of financing that does not come from either the Board of Nursing or the Board of Licensure in Medicine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bless you, Senator Brenner.
I was thinking the exact same thing, President Jackson. Gesundheit. And thank you, Representative Evans. Anyone else on the committee have a question or a brief comment? Yes, Representative Arford.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, President Jackson, for bringing this bill to us. I agree wholeheartedly with your sentiment. And I'm just wondering, I'm not clear on if there is another pathway forward. Are you suggesting that we look for another funding source for this bill, or I'm not clear if you see a path forward for it yourself.
So I think my intention was never to take the money from the boards that run all these. I mean, obviously it would have had to been a general fund, appropriation. So that's a problem. But I mean, having talked to the commissioner and different boards, it seems like it'd be really hard to track the people that are actually working in the state that would be licensed. I mean, there's definitely people that live in or reside in Maine but work outside the state and things like that, and it's got problems. So I'm not sure that the committee really could make it workable, and the work that it may take, was probably going to have a limited benefit to the actual people. But like I said, I guess struggling and trying to figure out a way to actually, show more support for the people in the industry was the intent here. I'm not sure if this is going to actually do it, but and so it does have problems, and I've come to understand that with discussions with the department and different agencies.
So much.
Thank you, President Jackson. And I think that's the end of questions from the committee. So I'll turn to Ms. Grosso, who signed up in support of the bill. Welcome, Ms. Grosso.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Senator Sanborn, Representative Tepler, and members of the committee. My name is Nadine Grosso, and I am the Vice President and Director of Communications for the Maine Healthcare Association. We represent almost all of the state's nursing homes and about another 125 or so assisted living providers, also known as private non-medical institutions, many of them. We are here in support of the bill today, and really maybe this is just a moral support statement based on what I've just heard, but we really do appreciate Senator Jackson's longstanding support of healthcare workers, and certainly in particular our healthcare workers. As you may be aware, the staffing shortages do persist, and when we saw this bill, we agreed with Senator Jackson in that this would be a welcome act of gratitude and an act of thanks for all that our healthcare workers have been through during the pandemic. I think based on what I've just heard, I understand that there really are some financial implications and some logistical challenges with perhaps trying to implement the bill. But nonetheless, as an association, we wanted to be on record as supporting any efforts to thank the long-term care workforce and the nurses and the other folks outlined in the bill that have just done a wonderful job during this pandemic. So thank you for the opportunity to comment today. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Grosso. Any questions from the committee for Ms. Grosso? Seeing none, we appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else in the meeting who would like to testify in favor of LD 1973? Seeing none, I will turn to those who are speaking in opposition and will call Commissioner Head.
It looks like Representative Tepler might have been interrupted. Commissioner Head, go ahead.
Thank you,
Okay.
Senator Sanborn. I'm back now. I just didn't want my phone to ring endlessly while Commissioner Head was coming through the wormhole.
I now see that my video is out. Hopefully, okay. I'm not exactly sure what's happening with my equipment today, but if you can hear me.
We can, so please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead. We agree with the sponsor that as a state and a country, we owe a debt of gratitude to all frontline healthcare professionals for heroic efforts during the pandemic. There is no question about that. However, I can't stress strongly enough how devastating the proposal, if enacted, would be to identified licensing programs in OPOR. We were invited to speak with President Jackson. We appreciated that and shared our concerns. And if the committee is interested in refunding fees for these licensees, we are hopeful that a solution can be identified that does not rely on dedicated revenue or licensing staff time. I have provided some background information here in my testimony. I think it is probably well known that our licensing boards operate only on dedicated revenue, and that dedicated revenue for each board is used to license qualified individuals, investigate and solve consumer complaints, and adopt rules to implement legislative intent. OPOR's licensing programs, as noted, are funded solely by dedicated revenue, meaning that all operating expenses of these programs are funded by license and license renewal fees paid by licensees. There is no general fund here, and we rely only on dedicated revenue. As noted, we don't receive general fund revenue, and pursuant to Maine law, dedicated revenue paid by licensees of each board may only be used to pay for the statutory and regulatory functions and operations of each board. Each board must be financially self-supporting to pay all of its regulatory expenses, and this includes a list that I will not go through, but sometimes it is not well understood that every action by the state employees to support these boards has a cost. On April 26, April 2020, Governor Mills did issue Executive Order 35 that extended the expiration dates for certain professional licenses until the end of the declared pandemic. OPOR notified its licensees about the order and offered them an opportunity to delay renewing their licenses or paying renewal fees. That executive order also directed the issuance of free licenses to all out-of-state healthcare licensees who wanted to assist in the healthcare response in Maine during the pandemic. And over 2,000 of these free licenses were issued. This required staff resources to issue the licenses quickly, but without the dedicated revenue that usually is derived from license fees. And the largest number of free licenses were issued to the mental health licensees that we work with, as well as respiratory therapy licensees. Throughout the pandemic, OPOR staff and licensing boards have worked tirelessly without interruption to carry out their existing responsibilities on behalf of the public. In addition to that, our staff shouldered a range of new responsibilities related to the pandemic. Staff resources and revenues were utilized to evaluate the process thousands of incoming applications for full licensure and issue over, as I noted, the 2,000 temporary emergency licenses at no cost to out-of-state licensees. Staff continued to investigate with boards numerous consumer complaints to provide public protection, conducted adjudicatory hearings, continued having board meetings, and initiated rulemaking proceedings. Developed important updates for OPOR licensees from the sources of information, CDC, DHHS, and DECD, to help craft and enforce COVID-19 protection measures, and spent hundreds of hours of staff resources to establish a workable system for the ability to hold licensing meetings to continue public protection in a remote setting. The bill proposes that OPOR refund all fees already paid and fees to be paid through the end of December 2022 to certain licensees, specifically respiratory care practitioners and midwives. OPOR boards and staff made sure that these licensees could continue their practices without interruption throughout the public health emergency, whether they had paid license fees or not, and regardless of whether they worked in Maine during that time. To be a little more specific, I have provided a sense of the impact, the negative impact on the Respiratory Care Board. The total to be refunded under the bill to respiratory therapists and technicians would total $275,000. Issuing those refunds would wipe out the board's operating funds and create a deficit in that board. So the options would be for either the board to wind down its operations without the ability to pay state staff and operating expenses described above, or as President Jackson indicated, it would require a general fund appropriation to continue the board's licensing program until it could double or triple its current licensing fees. And that would take about 2 license cycles at the increased fee structure until the board's operating account could stabilize. And it takes a while for license fees to be increased through the APA rulemaking process by OPOR. The negative impact on the complementary healthcare providers is different. The bill would require a refund of $28,000 to 37 midwives. This board, however, licenses 3 groups of licensees: acupuncturists, naturopathic doctors, and midwives. So in a sense, if those fees were refunded, the other 2 groups of licensees we would have to increase their fees to make the board stable financially. So those are the financial implications. But in addition to that, as President Jackson said, when we met with him, we explained that there's an administrative cost to refunding that level of fees. It does take, we have a financial structure that requires the refunds to go through a specific process. The checks, first of all, need to be created. The amounts have to be calculated, and we have to track down licensees who may not have kept their addresses current. So since the staff of the Respiratory Care Board also manages OPOR mental health licensing boards, the same staff would have to calculate the refunds, mail the checks, etc., which would effectively put on hold the processing of new mental health license applications and complaint processes and other work required for those mental health groups. That would be a significant issue for OPOR to have to do that. And I will just wrap up by saying the language toward the end of the bill on associated boards. We also, our respiratory care therapists do not practice independent of other healthcare licensees. So it's not clear to me what the total refunds that would be required to all associated healthcare practitioners, not only respiratory care and midwives. So I'm sure there are many other groups of licensees that might want to be included in this, and that would only worsen the impact on our licensing programs. But I want to end by saying we understand and recognize the great sentiment that President Jackson had in his mind when this was drafted. I want to make that clear. We agree with the sentiment. It's just that the structure of our licensing boards would not permit this to happen without great harm to the programs. Thank you very much for listening. And that concludes my testimony.
You're on mute, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. I was going to try to call on you, so thank you for the heads up. It's my turn to be the idiot with her mute on. Okay, so please go ahead, Senator Stewart, with your question for Commissioner Head.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much for being here, Commissioner. Appreciate it. And thanks to the sponsor for bringing this bill forward too. Occupational licensing is something that I've been interested in my 6 years now in the legislature. And so I certainly echo the comments as well about the intent behind the bill to do something for those that have served so diligently throughout the pandemic the last couple of years. And I guess, so my question is, would it be possible to get for the work session from your department an ongoing or some sort of tally as to what exactly the amount is that all of these occupational boards have to pay each year? And I'll explain the reason why. I believe that this sort of system that we have in Maine is sending the wrong message to the private sector and those that are doing this work, whether it be anything from nursing to serving as a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, you name it. We need more of these professionals in Maine. And I feel personally, philosophically, that these hurdles that we're putting up in front of them, particularly financially, don't actually serve to the best interest of our constituents in making sure that they have access to all of those different types of professionals. Certainly understand the work that's going on within the boards to make sure that there are consumer protections that are available and that complaints against any wrongdoers are investigated and potentially result in some sort of repercussion for those folks. But it's more the message that I think that gets sent, where we've got this, once again, the state is asking for more money for these folks that have spent many years in some cases in professional development schools, and are making the choice to serve their constituents. And so if we could get at the root of that, I think that this bill's intent is spot on, but I think there's a bigger issue going on here. And I think that it's worth looking into, and this committee with having jurisdiction over it. I recognize it's a short session as well, and we're trying to get out of here, but perhaps there can be something that's done in that regard to look at the bigger picture and the message that's being sent by the state because of these fees and the way that it's structured. So that, and then again, my request is just to get some more information for the work session.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. I guess I have two questions that go along with Senator Stewart's that I'd like to have come back for the work session from either the commissioner or Ms. McCarthy Reed, if we can get answers, or perhaps some of the other folks who will testify in a minute or two. One question is, how often do employers of these licensees cover the license fees for their hired professionals? And the other question is, to what extent are license fees deductible as business expenses from taxes? So those are two questions that I have that I think accompany the senator's questions. But I also saw that we had, yes, Commissioner Head, please go ahead with your response.
Thank you very much for the questions. I understand why they're being asked at this time. On Senator Stewart's questions, I want to make sure I understand that the information that is being requested. Is the inference that license fees are unreasonably high? Is that the point of the question, or is the question more, why do we have individual board operating accounts? I don't want to leave here not understanding what information is being requested, if I could ask.
Sure. Madam Chair, if I may respond.
Please, of course.
Thank you. And thanks for the question, Commissioner. So I guess it's not about the reasonableness of fees. It's more the question and getting at and this is the legislative one, right? Why we decided to structure it in this way at all, as opposed to just having, general, if we have said these boards need to exist, who should be paying for these boards to exist and operate and do the things that they need to do if we're trying to attract more of these folks into our state and to doing the work that they're doing and we agree is important work. And so that's it.
Okay.
I think it's more the latter of the two options that you laid out there.
I totally understand and would be happy to give you that history before the work session. It's a very interesting question. There is a clear answer, and I want to put that in writing for you because I think it is important. With respect to the question, I'm sorry, going back to Representative Tepler's question, I'm not sure I can answer either of those questions. My forte is not tax matters. I can ask for help with that to see what the possibilities may be. And I know you had another question and it is escaping me. I wonder if you could repeat that.
Yes, thank you so much, Commissioner. And I wasn't necessarily thinking that you were going to be the source of answers for these questions. One was for the tax issue that I'm sorry. I have a landline and I have no way of turning it off, so I apologize that it's disrupting at the moment.
I can hear you. I can hear you very clearly.
Thank you. I'm very disturbed by this. This is just the nature of Zoom, I guess, but I apologize. No, so the other question was about whether employers are covering the cost of licensing fees. So if you're a new doctor who's coming to work at Maine Medical Center, who covers your Maine license fee? Is it yourself? Do you pay that yourself, or does Maine Medical Center pay that fee? And I guess that question might be more answerable by Dan Moran or someone else who will come forward to speak in a little while. So thank you, Commissioner Head. But I do see one more question for you from Representative Matheson. Go ahead, Representative Matheson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably more a statement, if this is okay to make to Commissioner Head. Our job here in this committee is to try to decrease speed bumps and increase ability for people to be licensed. And I know that your department has been overwhelmed with that work. We saw that with the mental health practitioners. So decreasing funding would not be something that I would be interested in, but there's certainly an argument, and I appreciate Senator Stewart's statements. There should be an argument that increased funding would probably benefit your department so that licensing is more available and licensed professionals are more available. So I would just put that out there, but I would be curious if we have just information on what a typical licensing fee is for most of these practitioners that we're talking about today. Is that something that's very readily available on your website?
It is, excuse me, it is available on the website, but I can make that I can certainly have that ready for you before the work session. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much for your testimony and your help in sorting some of the thinking we have here. I see no further questions from the committee for Commissioner Head, so we'll send her back into the attendee space. I will next call Mr. Moran of the Maine Medical Association. I would like to ask all those testifying in opposition, because we have quite a few, to please keep brevity in mind for the committee's sake, and also not to overwhelm us with repeated testimony. Thank you. So, Mr. Moran, please go ahead.
Madam Chair, you know I speak in jest a lot. You must be talking to my wife when you say keep brevity in mind when you speak. So, but I'll try my best. just to answer your question right off, in case I forget, I do know for a fact that Maine Health, for example, has their physicians pay for their licensing fees, and then they are reimbursed for those licensing fees as employees of Maine Health. I know that because somebody in my household does that very process. So my name is Dan Moran. I'm Director of Communications and Government Affairs for the Maine Medical Association. And you have our testimony that was uploaded earlier this morning. Key points on the testimony. First off, we oppose legislative initiatives to reduce or divert licensing fee special revenue funds that are used to support and operate licensing boards, unless the fees are determined to exceed the cost of regulation and oversight. We have a suggestion that we amend the bill or introduce another bill to instead offer a refundable tax credit or tax expenditure that would be accountable directly to the state general fund for licensees outlined in the bill, considering Maine's 800 million plus state general fund surplus. At the end of my testimony, you'll see a draft bill that is making its way through the Hawaii legislature right now. that we think would be worth pursuing in the intent that the Senate President is intending. The Senate President's position, influence, and leadership in the upcoming supplemental budget process could make such action a reality. New York's Governor Kathy Hochul recently summarized it best. She quoted in her State of the State, "We must stop the current hemorrhaging of healthcare workers, and we're going to do it not just by saying we owe them a debt of gratitude, but actually paying them the debt we owe." I would add on behalf of the MMA leadership that they are aware of no direct financial assistance afforded to frontline healthcare workers, despite nearly $1 billion coming to Maine in the form of coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds from the American Rescue Plan, and an allowance for those federal funds to be used to, quote, provide premium pay for essential workers. Providing a refundable tax credit also ensures the legislation would benefit healthcare professionals living, working, and paying taxes in Maine, rather than assist those living out of state who happen to maintain a Maine license. It is the MMA's understanding that half of the licensing fees used to operate the Board of Licensure in Medicine, for example, comes from those living out of state. LD 1973 would benefit thousands living outside of Maine if it was applied to other licensing boards. We would also note that Executive Order 1619/20 from Governor Mills, issued on March 20th, 2020, extended the expiration dates of licensees for those licensed by the Board of Licensure in Medicine, the Board of Osteopathic Licensure, and the State Board of Nursing until 30 days after the end of the declared emergency. The state of civil emergency started on March 15th, and it ended at midnight on June 30th, 2021. Therefore, no licensee outlined in the executive order would have been required to pay a licensing fee between that period. The executive order also directed the issuance of free licenses to certain qualifying physicians, PAs, and nurses, for example, retired or out of state during the state of civil emergency. We also have in our testimony why physician licensing boards exist, and I would refer Senator Stewart to that. We believe wholeheartedly in physician licensing boards. The draft amendment, which brought physician assistants into the bill, actually strengthened our opposition to the bill because it directly affects the osteopathic board and the Board of Licensure in Medicine. If the licensees are required to pay increased fees in the future to replenish the funds that would be taken away by this bill, it wouldn't serve its intended purpose. So we oppose the bill, and I have additional resources in the end of our testimony that references licensing backlogs in some states that prevent healthcare workers from seeing patients. Reducing revenue might have that happen here. I have a link to Governor Hochul's retention bonus of up to $3,000 for healthcare workers, including physicians. An article on Hawaii's $10,000 income tax credit. And if you want to be competitive, I heard Senator Stewart mention competitiveness. If other states are giving $3,000 retention bonuses and $10,000 income tax credits, although well-intended, $600 off of your licensing fees every 2 years isn't going to compete very well. I'd be happy to take any questions and provide any information for the work session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moran, for your testimony. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Moran? Seeing none, we appreciate your testimony, and I have to add, I especially appreciate you appending an additional idea on how we can honor our healthcare workers to your testimony, because I think it's always good when you say no to something to say yes to something else. So I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Representative Tepler, and we believe that's important. We also run the Maine Medical Professionals Health Program, which offers assistance to people, practitioners, clinicians, even other than physicians, for behavioral health issues, substance use disorders. So we greatly appreciate any assistance to frontline healthcare workers based on what they've done the past couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we will send Mr. Moran back through the wormhole, and I will ask Ms. LaRue to please come present her testimony in opposition to the bill.
Hi, Representative Tepler, can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. LaRue, it's nice to hear your voice. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Sanborn and Representative Tepler and members of the Committee on Health Coverage, Insurance, and Financial Services. I do not want to be redundant with my testimony. I certainly agree with all that has been said. I also want to thank Senator Jackson for his support of all of our healthcare workers in Maine and nurses particularly. I am the president-elect of the American Nurses Association of Maine. We are a 501c3 corporation with 625 members representing all Maine's nurses. And just a brief history 101, it was in 1914 that the American Nurses Association set up offices in Maine and helped the legislature to establish the Maine State Board of Nursing. So in that regard, we have always been supporters of the Maine State Board of Nursing because it is their responsibility and they are charged with the public health and welfare in the area of nursing service. So I won't take any more of your time. I submitted my testimony earlier. It really is a reflection of all that has been said. We definitely think that in the absence of any current plan to fund the Maine State Board of Nursing to the level that's needed, that we would oppose this bill. So thank you very much for giving me the time.
Thank you, Ms. LaRue. Are there any questions from the committee for Ms. LaRue? Seeing none, we appreciate your testimony, and we will next call Kim Escabel of the Maine State Board of Nursing, who's testifying in opposition. Welcome, Ms. Escabel.
Thank you, Senator Sanborn, Representative Tepler, and members of the committee. I am Kim Escabel. I'm the Executive Director for the State Board of Nursing, and I am here today to testify in opposition to the bill. Since its creation by the state's legislature in 1914, the State Board of Nursing has been protecting the citizens of the state of Maine by ensuring its licensees are professional, ethical, and competent. We do this through licensing, investigating, and resolving complaints filed with the board, approving pre-licensure nursing education programs, and rulemaking. The board currently has 33,461 active licensees. For a 2-year license, LPNs pay a $50 fee, RNs a $75 fee, and APRNs $100. I can share that a lot of travel agencies actually pay licensing fees or reimburse nurses that travel to Maine to practice. Some nursing programs actually pay the initial licensing application fee for its graduates. So I do offer the following comments in opposition to LD 1973. As mentioned earlier, the intent of section 1.6 of the bill is unclear. The language appears to apply to any person associated with the practices of the individuals that are listed in the bill. This would potentially include advanced practice registered nurses, which would increase the fiscal impact on the Board of Nursing. Governor Mills' Executive Order 16 did extend the expiration of licenses until 30 days after the end of the declared emergency. As Commissioner had mentioned, our board did notify those licensees. We gave them the opportunity to delay renewing their licenses or paying the renewal fees if they chose. Many licensees chose to renew their licenses, which provided the board with ongoing revenue to maintain its operations. The order also directed the board to issue free licenses to out-of-state nurses as well as qualifying retired nurses in Maine to assist with the pandemic. Throughout 2020 and the pandemic, not only did the board continue to provide its usual services, but the staff took on additional responsibilities responding to a range of issues. The board resources and revenues were used during the pandemic to evaluate and process initial licensure and relicensure applications, 7,801 new licenses, and 36,819 renewals between January 1st of 2020 and the end of December of 2021. It investigated over 1,000 complaints. We provided important updates to licensees from the board and the Maine Center for Disease Control. We conducted emergency rulemaking. We conducted pre-licensure nursing education program virtual site visits, and we established a workable system for continuing the ability to hold board meetings in a remote setting. The board's mission of protecting the public, as Commissioner Head mentioned, is funded solely through the collection of fees of dedicated revenue associated with licensure and relicensure, which LD 1973 proposes to refund to licensees for the previous 2.75 years, regardless of whether they worked in Maine or not. The licensing fees, the dedicated revenue pays for the statutory and regulatory functions of the board. I'm not going to go through those. Those are listed in my testimony. But this bill would essentially eliminate the board's dedicated revenue for almost 3 years and would essentially shut down its programs in place to protect the public. The estimated fiscal impact would exceed $4 million. The board simply does not have enough money in reserve to be able to refund licensing fees and continue to operate its programs to protect the citizens of Maine. Without that protection in place, state of Maine citizens, particularly those under the care of a nurse, would be more vulnerable to unsafe nursing practices by virtue of illness or injury and the dependent nature of the nurse-patient relationship. It also puts an administrative burden on the board in refunding those licenses. The board appreciates the intent of the bill as a measure to recognize frontline healthcare workers, but again, it would effectively eliminate the board's programs. The board urges the committee to consider other funding sources for this initiative, such as a general fund appropriation or a refundable tax credit specifically for healthcare workers living, working, and paying taxes in Maine that would amount to the cost of their licensing fees. Thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Escabel. Any questions from the committee for Ms. Escabel? Seeing none, we will send you back to the attendee room and we will ask Ms. Harvey McPherson to please join us and testify in opposition to the bill. And just a little reminder again regarding brevity and repetitive testimony. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Sanborn, Representative Tepler, and committee members. My name is Lisa Harvey McPherson, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Organization of Maine Nursing Leadership. I have the honor to serve as the chair of their legislative committee. Our members represent nursing leaders in a variety of positions in all of Maine's healthcare settings, and we also have members from across Maine's schools of nursing supporting the leadership faculty roles throughout the state of Maine. We testified for two reasons. One, to thank President Jackson for sponsoring this bill in an effort and to support the important work that nurses are doing throughout the state of Maine. And we absolutely appreciate the intent of the bill. But for all of the reasons that you've heard, we must oppose the bill, as the benefit to the nurse is outweighed by the significant negative impact to the Board of Nursing. What I will do, based on the questions that the committee has posed, I will send out a question to the Omni Nursing Leader membership to gather information on healthcare organizations and academic institutions supporting the nurse licensing fees of their employees. I'd be glad to do that and bring that information to the work session. And with that, I will conclude.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harvey McPherson, both for your brevity and for your attempt to answer my question.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? No, seeing none. We do very much appreciate your testimony, and we'll next turn to Mr. Timothy Terranova from the Board of Licensure in Medicine. Welcome, Mr. Terranova. We can see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Sanborn, Representative Tepler, and members of the committee. My name is Tim Terranova, and I am the Assistant Executive Director for the Board of Licensure in Medicine. The board licenses allopathic physicians, MDs, and physician assistants. I'm here today to testify in opposition to LD 1973. And you've asked for brevity, and Commissioner Head has said things much better than I could. She's gone through everything, so I won't go through all of that again. I would just point out that Section 6 of the bill, which is very broad, and it says anyone associated with the practice of the people listed in the bill, has the ability to cast a very wide net. And I think that was intended, and I think the intent is good. We agree that we should absolutely thank and help these healthcare workers who have worked so hard. But that would apply to all of our licensees, which would affect our funding by over $6 million is what we would have to refund. And we would not be able to function. We also agree with the MMA that perhaps a tax credit for healthcare workers who live and work in Maine might be a better way to go. I'm happy to answer questions. You have all the written testimony, but again, I understand that you would like some brevity, and I won't go through all of that again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Terranova, for your brevity. And I will look to see if the committee has any questions for you. No? Seeing none, we appreciate your being here and letting us know the Board of Medicine's position, the Board of Licensure in Medicine's position on this bill. So thank you very much. And that brings to an end my list of those wishing to give testimony in opposition. Is there anyone else in the attendee space who would like to testify in opposition to the bill? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to testify neither for nor against the bill? Again, seeing none, I'll bring to a close the hearing on LD 1973. And the committee will take a break now for lunch and caucuses. And we'll meet again for a work session at 1 p.m. So slightly less than an hour from now. All right, see everyone in a little while. Take care. Bye-bye.
Representative Tepler, you want to sign off?
Wow, Senator Brenner's fast at moving from one Zoom to the other.
Don't you think Zoom should allow us to have multiple Zoom windows open on one computer just for legislators?
It would be really helpful. All right, I think we've got a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If Representative Quint and Representative Morris are with us, then we can get started. Perfect. Okay. So we have just one work session this afternoon. It is maybe our second or third work session on LD 1858, which relates to EMS providers and their ability to act as medical assistants in some various different scenarios. Colleen circulated a couple of days ago a new amended proposal based on our discussion about the last amended proposal that we had at our last work session. So I'm going to ask Colleen to screen share that amended proposal with the committee, walk us through it very briefly. I have heard, I think, from all of the interested parties that they're okay with the language, maybe not super excited about it, but okay with us proceeding with the language that Colleen has proposed, with one exception, which is that I think we want to add the words and physician's assistants into the discussion about delegated authority. So it would just say physicians and physician's assistants in the third part of the proposal. So Colleen, if you'll screen share that, we'll make sure the whole committee is on the same page, and then I'll see if we missed anything from the advocates.
Sure. So here is a copy of the draft amendment that I shared, as Senator Sanborn said, distributed to the interested parties and the stakeholders on Tuesday. It maintains the emergency preamble with just slightly revising the preamble language to indicate that what the intent of the bill is to clarify, or that currently those EMS persons who work in other healthcare facility settings as medical assistants, their authority to work under delegated authority is unclear given the current law that focuses only on hospitals, and then just adds reference that the need for clarification is why the bill is being put forward. And then section 1 retains language from the original bill to clarify that EMS licensed personnel may render medical services in a hospital or other healthcare facility setting. So it adds healthcare facility there. It does remove the language relating to contracted agents. I think because section 3 will ask for some further study of that issue. But otherwise maintains the language that was in the original bill, which was section 1. And then it adds 2 new provisions. Section 2 just confirms the authority given by the EMS board for the Jackman pilot project to move forward. It puts in unallocated language that those services that have been authorized pursuant to the pilot project may continue to be provided so long as the project remains approved by the EMS board. So that's section 2. And then the last section would direct the Board of Licensure in Medicine and the Board of Osteopathic Licensure in consultation with the EMS board and interested stakeholders to develop some further guidance under which physicians, and as Senator Sanborn suggested, amending this to refer to both physicians and physician assistants for delegating activities to medical assistants, focusing on the issue of those individuals who might be acting contemporaneously pursuant to a contractual arrangement as a medical assistant under delegated authority and as an EMS, under an EMS license. And this is getting at, I think, the issue that you discussed at your last work session, that some of the concerns that Mr. Hurley raised on behalf of the EMS board about where those lines are in terms of authority over the activities of someone who's acting both as a medical assistant and as a licensed EMS personnel, potentially during the same shift and under certain contractual arrangements. So it would direct the boards to develop guidance and address certain issues, including the legal relationship, the settings, the scope and extent of supervision, and any training and education requirements. It would ask the boards to report back next session to the legislature and include any recommendations that they might have for necessary statutory changes. And then it gives authority to the HCIFS committee to submit legislation related to the report to the first regular session of the 131st legislature. So that's the proposed amendment for purposes of your discussion.
Thanks. Okay, so I have represented verbally to the committee that I think all the stakeholders who've been actively involved in these discussions about this issue feel that this draft appropriately captures a path forward. As I mentioned, they're not all entirely thrilled about all the words in the draft, but I wanted to just I want to move through this fairly quickly because we have already had several work sessions on this. But I did want to offer a moment for anyone who is in the meeting who thinks I've misrepresented their position on this or who has grave concerns about the committee moving forward with the language to raise their hands so that we're not proceeding on that, anything I've said being inaccurate or unfair. Pausing for a moment and not seeing any hands go up, which is excellent. That makes me feel better. So did want to just kind of make sure that we had done that double check. I'm going to ask if there's any questions on the committee for Colleen or for myself, who is involved in trying to figure out the language here before we proceed. All right, I don't see any, so I'll look for a motion from the committee. Representative Arford.
Yep, I would like to move an ought to pass as amended on LD 1858.
Thank you, Representative Arford. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Evans. Is there any further discussion of the motion? All right, not seeing any, we'll have the clerk call the roll.
Thank you. Senator Sanborn.
Yes.
Senator Sanborn, yes. Senator Brenner.
Yes.
Senator Brenner, yes. Senator Stewart.
Yes.
Senator Stewart, yes. Representative Tepler.
Yes.
Representative Tepler, yes. Representative Alford.
Yes.
Representative Alford, yes. Representative Bleier.
Yes.
Representative Bleier, yes. Representative Brooks. Representative Connor.
Yes.
Representative Connor, yes. Representative Evans.
Yes.
Representative Evans, yes. Representative Matheson.
Yes.
Representative Matheson, yes. Representative Malarano.
Yes.
Representative Malarano, yes. Representative Morris.
Yes.
Representative Morris, yes. Representative Quinn.
Yes.
Representative Quinn, yes. 12 members of the committee having voted in the affirmative, 0 in the negative.
Thank you very much, Edna. So it is a unanimous vote of those present to move us forward on this. Colleen, do you have language review for us, or are you all set?
I have a couple of quick language reviews if you wanted to look at them on the two bills that you voted on Tuesday with just slight, making those slight changes that you talked about. I don't yet have the fiscal information, and they also have LD 1776, which was the bill about emergency supplies of chronic drugs, which made those additional changes that you hadn't, you verbally did that at your last, when you voted, and hadn't seen that yet, although I'm still waiting on fiscal. So I have those, and I have a few others, but one of them is LD 441, which Representative Brooks is the only one on the minority amendment. And since she's not here, I thought we'd wait until Tuesday. So I'll have the rest of those, a few others for you on Tuesday. But if you want to do these three quickly, we could.
Sure. And I'll have to apologize to Representative Evans, who I told we'd already done 1776 writ language review on the phone just a few minutes ago.
Oh, sorry.
That's my confusion.
Well, you had done it once. And so, but I had to revise. This is a cleaner version that you're seeing. So I thought I'd bring it back to you. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is LD 1776. This is just so the first section on coverage for emergency supplies, you didn't make any change when you took your, in terms of insurance coverage.
You can't see your screen, Colleen.
Oh, sorry. I didn't do it. Didn't do it right. Here we go. I hit it, but it didn't take. So here we go.
Got it.
Section 1 of the bill relates to insurance coverage, and you had not made any change here to the language other than just adding the reference to the health savings accounts. And that was done in a previous draft. So nothing new here, but in section 2, which was the provision that authorizes pharmacists to dispense and sell emergency supplies, I did need to make 2 additional changes based on your previous language review. One was adding a provision or language that would give authority to the practitioner who issued the prescription, the ability to record that or include a notation on that prescription that no emergency supply is permitted. So that's here in the highlighted yellow language. And then again, I just wanted to note for you in paragraphs F and G with regard to controlled substances on schedules 3 and 4, the amount of the supply does not exceed 7 days. And no controlled substances can be prescribed under this provision if they're scheduled 1 or 2. And then you also had added the language that a pharmacist may not dispense or sell a drug more than twice in a 12-month period. And then also you had wanted to add some language that the pharmacist must notify the practitioner who issued the prescription.
That seems to be missing some
Yeah,
words.
I'm missing some words there, but the intent of this one, as I'm looking at it, I'm missing some words. So the pharmacist who issued the prescription must notify the practitioner who issued the prescription or another practitioner responsible for the patient's care no later than 72 hours after they've done it. So after pharmacist, I'm missing a few words there. So I'll clarify that. So that was the other change that you need to do. So my apologies, I didn't review it quickly. I did it quickly this morning. So there you go. I'll add that there. I haven't yet received the fiscal or information about this, so you'll see it again when that comes back before it is reported out of committee. The next one was the bill that you just talked about on Tuesday and voted related to LD 794, replacing that bill with a resolve asking the Department of Health and Human Services to do a survey, and you had sort of wordsmithed it. And we wordsmithed it kind of on the fly when you voted. So it's been clarified further so that the Department of Health and Human Services would be redirected to survey state contracted providers of therapeutic foster care about their liability insurance coverage, the cost of that coverage, and any difficulties in obtaining and maintaining that coverage due to availability and cost.
The department is also asked to survey other states about how therapeutic foster care is delivered, the cost of liability insurance if the services are delivered through contracts with providers, and what difficulties might have been identified in those states related to the cost and availability of liability insurance. Then, based on that information from the surveys, the department shall identify potential recommendations to address costs and report that back to the Health and Human Services Committee next session. So that's LD 794. And then lastly, LD 1266. This was, there were two suggestions that the Bureau of Insurance had made about making some changes to the language. And they're highlighted here on page 2 in paragraph B here, just clarifying the sentence to reflect existing authority that gives carriers 30 days to respond to requests for information from the superintendent. So striking out that language that's highlighted there. And then in subsection 8, just striking out the beginning of that second sentence, removing that highlighted language there. So those were those two as well. That was all I had for you to do quickly today. And then I should have more for you Tuesday afternoon or next week, whenever you have time permitting.
Great. Does anyone else on the committee have any announcements? All right. Go ahead, Colleen.
I was just gonna remind folks about the schedule for next week. Edna's gonna send that out, but the committee, I did send out the information about the committee's joint hearing with the Appropriations Committee on Wednesday morning. And in light of that, the chairs are going to add some work sessions on Wednesday following that. So the committee's plan or schedule next week will include Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday meetings. And Edna will have the weekly schedule and work session notice out shortly.
And I think it's going to encompass all but maybe 5 of our bills. And so we're on track as a committee to be able to meet our deadline of voting 100% of our bills by March 11th. So great work, everybody. And, I think we've been moving things through quite effectively as a committee and working together really well. So thank you all for your hard work on that. And we've got just a couple more weeks left of our work together as a committee in this session. All right. So with that, we're going to adjourn and wish good luck to the basketball team that Ms. McCarthy Reed's daughter plays on. And I hope they do a wonderful job this afternoon. All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye.
Out of curiosity, who is the team?
Oh, she goes to North Yarmouth Academy. They're playing Carabac this afternoon. So,
Nice.
and they're a little bit of an underdog. So we'll see.
All right, we'll go get
They'll
them.
Do it. Yeah, hopefully. Thanks.
All right. Enjoy, everybody. Take care.
Bye.